Hi everyone. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Andy. Andy Culligan is a marketer stuck in a salesperson's body. He believes the only way to achieve revenue growth is joined by the hip approach to marketing and sales. Andy's core focus is making sure that marketing goals are 100% aligned to those of sales organizations. Misalignment of goals results in a misalignment of personnel. His approach is to ensure that marketing teams are carrying a revenue target, which in turn will enable sales to reach their targets. Andy has close to a decade of experience in SaaS MarTech. Andy has built teams from the ground up, managing both marketing and sales teams to pipeline success. Andy is the Chief Marketing Officer of Leadfeeder, one of the great tools that we ourselves use as well. And hi, Andy, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for that very nice introduction there. That was that was very good. Yeah, everything's going well. We're getting busier now towards the end of the summer, coming into autumn now, so ready to get geared up and ramped up again and get going again,
Yeah. And how are things in Vienna? How is the lockdown and everything? It's not as affected badly as other places, right?
So background on me, I'm based in Vienna, Austria, as you just mentioned, but I'm clearly not Austrian. I grew up in Ireland and I've been living in Vienna for 11 years, but yeah, so things are okay here in Vienna. I would say at the moment it seems like business as usual, but who knows, that could change overnight. We had to say, we were one of the first countries in Austria to go into lockdown in Europe in early March.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough, and then things started to reopen around May time. And it's been, well, myself and my family, we stay careful. But it's somewhat business as usual, it would seem. But yeah, it depends how you take it yourself. We err on the side of caution here.
Sure. So yeah, so you would like to talk about what session you're talking today?
Sure. So I would like to talk today about, because the focus of this particular summit is growth, right? I'd like to talk about how we've managed as a marketing team here at Leadfeeder and also with our sales org to grow the Leadfeeder brand during the pandemic. So, I'll bring you through it now in a couple of minutes, but the same as every company at the start of sort of March or mid-March, it was a worry to be like, okay, well, we've got this thing incoming and oncoming, and how's that going to affect us as a company and also as a brand? What's it going to mean? What are the next 6 months going to look like? What are the next 12 months going to look like? What's the space going to look like? How are our customers going to be affected? All of these open questions, right? And from my side, it was really just taking things in little, very small chunks of time, like looking at the next 2 days, looking at the next week. Mm-hmm. It was never, let's look for the next 6 months type of thing and try to come up with a strategy, because we did that. We did that at the start of the year, where it was like, okay, well, we need to obviously, come up with our plan for 2020. And of course, when it came to mid-March, then it was like, okay, forget that plan. Let's move on to something completely new. So maybe I'll start by just sharing my screen and bringing you guys through what we've done. And give me just a moment. I'll share now, and I'll just go into presentation mode as well. So as I said, I'm going to just talk about, okay, we'll move away from, a very focused, detailed plan in terms of what we're supposed to be doing for 2020, and moving more towards how we can, pivot all of the time in very small spaces of time to make sure that you keep on capitalizing on micro opportunities that are happening based on everything that you're doing, right? So I call this particular piece of Don't Stop Moving, how we managed to grow our brand during the global pandemic, right? So first of all, you guys have already given me a very good intro there. So I'm the CMO at Leadfeeder. If you want, please feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I guess this is where we came across one another prior to this. And but please do feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or reach out. I'd be happy to have a conversation. Just to start, so as I mentioned, I'm Irish. So I was to ask you this question: where do you think this is? Any idea? Have you been in Ireland before?
I've never been to Ireland, so
This is in Dublin, okay? And in Dublin, this is my hometown, Dublin, and every year on the 17th of March, there's a national holiday in Ireland called St. Patrick's Day. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Which everybody, I guess, knows. So this is outside a bar in an area in Dublin known as Temple Bar, which is a very busy tourist location within Dublin. And this was 2019. Okay. So this is how the Temple Bar, which is a well-known pub in Dublin, is looking on St. Patrick's Day, so the 17th of March in 2019. Okay. Now, if I look at it in 2020, look at that stark difference, right? So for me as an Irishman watching this, I was like, okay, well, we're in something deep here, you know, when I see this happening, you know. And like there was little at the start of this whole pandemic piece, there was a lot of people not really taking it seriously. It was like it was, you know, a sort of a fear, but like people thinking that the whole world is going to lock down and whatnot. We were really thinking, hey, this couldn't be the case. Okay. But if I look at little micro things, as I mentioned earlier on, like little micro things that were happening across the globe and also closer to home for me, like here, it was starting to say, okay, this is getting more serious. So things like, for example, in Ireland, the St. Patrick's Day parade, which is normally attended by a couple of million people every year, right? And Ireland has a small population. It's got less than 5 million inhabitants. And a couple of million people go watch a parade in Dublin. The fact that that was cancelled shows that, okay, something is going on here. And then the biggest party day of the year in Ireland also cancelled. Look at that. You can see the stark contrast between those two photos. So 2019, absolutely jam-packed the streets. 2020, one person you can see in that photo. Same time of the day, same place, right? So to me, I was starting to think then, okay, like things are starting to change a little bit. And it was around that time as well, that specific week, when Donald Trump announced that he was going to close the borders with the US. Okay. And I'll get to that a little bit later on, how that actually plays a part in the story that I'm about to tell. But I'll get back to that a little bit later on. But our initial reaction, okay, so what's the first reaction by anybody that's in a tech organization or any organization for that matter when they're looking at marketing, right? This is basically the thing that's going through my head. Our CFO saying to me, look, we need to pull back a little bit. We need to make sure that we have enough runway to last us now through this. We don't know how long it's going to last. Our CEO is saying the same thing. Our investors saying the same thing. And I'm looking at things being like, okay, well, right, how can I do more with less? Okay. So if we look at this cartoon here, imagine I'm the marketer sitting there in the corner and I'm being stripped away of my assets, right? And I think the challenge in this piece has been, or one of the things that's revealed is, marketers that have done something and have been a bit more clever about how they present their brands have managed to grow their brand with very, very little resource during this time. Or when I say little resource, more, let's say, less money. Okay. So we've, just to give you an insight into Leadfeeder, what we've done is we've basically cut our budgets by 66% starting from March. Okay. So we're operating on a third of the budget what we're operating in January and February, right? And we're still at around that level, okay? Just an FYI, okay? So with that, I take it, okay, it's a challenge, but I'd say, okay, challenge accepted, you know, like, again, the point of this is don't stop moving, always be looking to do something. And I tell this to my team is, you know, always be looking to beg, borrow, or steal, right? Who do you have in your network? What can they do for you? What can you do for them? How can you just keep going, move, and try to get to the next level, right? And how can you get as much of that stuff for free? And that's basically where we were left at, right? So as I said, there's a bit of a timeline here. So that specific week prior to that St. Patrick's Day, which was the 17th, which was on the Tuesday. So on the 15th, again, I think it was maybe the 13th or 14th, perhaps, that Trump announced that it was that US were going to stop people coming in and out. So it was for sure that we were going to be going into some form of pandemic. So the first thing that I start thinking of is the team, right? So I know that the week prior that I've already heard from our CFO, CEO, investors, board, everything, cut budgets, right? So I'm already thinking, okay, how's that going to be for the team? The team are obviously going to be under pressure then. They're going to be insecure. They're going to be worried about what's going to happen to their jobs. They're going to be worried about what's going to happen from us from a marketing perspective. I'm coming in cutting budgets. What's all this going to mean, right? First and foremost, let's make sure that everybody's calm and let's make sure that we have somewhat of a plan, okay? So this is the message that I sent out to the team on the 15th of March, late in the Sunday evening, 6 p.m. Just say, hey, crazy weekend, lots going on. There's lots of uncertainty, but look, let's come together as a team. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page, and let's make sure that we know exactly what we need to be doing next. Okay. If anybody has any questions, concerns, whatever, let's make sure that we address them here. Let's not leave anything, you know, pushed away or pushed to the side. Let's put everything down on the table and we can discuss things openly as a team. And that's, I think, very important from the start because there was a lot of fear. Okay. So first things first, what did we do first? Let's cut the fat. Let's get rid of all of our fat and let's look at, first of all of our campaigns that are working, and more importantly, all of our campaigns that aren't. Okay. Simple things that we looked at, right? What's the, like when I say cutting the fat, like what's the immediate piece of fat that you can see? For example, we had a theory for a while that brand campaigns, although they perform well, so bidding on your own brand on Google, although they perform pretty well, do you really need them? Our theory was that if somebody's searching for you as a brand, they're more likely to go and have a look down below the paid results, right? They're more likely to click below, right? It just, you know, it makes sense. So we decided, okay, let's test that hypothesis. And immediately with that, I think we were saving like 10K a month by just doing that, cutting it completely, right? Then we started digging a little bit deeper, being like, okay, which keyword campaigns are actually performing rather than just bringing in like leads? Okay, so what's actually turning to revenue? So my thing is, like, I started with Leadfeeder in December. Okay, so I haven't been with Leadfeeder a very, very long time. But my thing has always been as a marketer, and you mentioned it earlier when you introed me, is creating that alignment or closing the gap between marketing and sales. And how do you do that? By aligning the marketing goals towards the sales goals, which is always revenue. So the first thing I said when I came into Leadfeeder is, okay, guys, like, I know we're not fully there yet in terms of matching what we're doing back to revenue, but we need to get as close as possible to that. And this pandemic has actually sped that up because we knew our budget's incredibly limited. So we need to make sure we're getting the most bang for our buck. So we've managed to create a red line between everything we're doing all the way down to the revenue piece. Okay, so from a Leadfeeder perspective, it's somewhat easy to do that because we drive all of our main like top conversion is to drive people onto a trial. Then once they're on the trial, they do the free trial for 2 weeks, and then they convert into a customer either directly via the product or directly via a salesperson reaching out. Okay, so it's relatively easy to draw a line through that. Okay, now we're a volume business model, coming also from an enterprise business model myself, where you're selling into, you know, massive organizations. And your deal sizes, your average revenue per order, for example, could be minimum contracts of 100K a year type of thing. And you have smaller customers or smaller number of customers rather than broad number of customers. Even with that, you should be looking at what's actually breaking down the doors of my client base, right? Like and look at it that way. You're not going to be able to tie it directly back to revenue, but at the same time, what you'd be able to do is look at it from maybe an SDR perspective. If I'm running this specific campaign, are the SDRs getting connects afterwards, or your BDR team, or your sales team, whatever it might be? Are they managing to get connects with that person? Is that person the right person within the organization? So on and so forth. Like, it should always have some form of a red line between the revenue org, if not directly from revenue, but people that are in the revenue org all the way back, right? So back to this initial thing, cut all brand campaigns, that was cutting fat. And then what we did was anything that wasn't paying back within a 12-month period, cut it, right? Cut it completely, okay? Now with that, what we managed to do is lower our customer acquisition costs by like massive, right? And at the same time, we also managed to increase the payback period. So our payback period went from sort of like 7, 8, 9 months up to past 12 months. Or no, sorry, wrong way. It went from like 16 months down to sort of 9 months, right? And we were pushing that in a lot of our campaigns. So yeah, I went the opposite way there. So, but yeah, so 16 months down to below 12 months, right? Just by doing things like that. Now you might say, hey, but did that affect lead volume and traffic, et cetera, et cetera? I'll get to that now in a moment. Short answer is no, but let me show you the results, okay? But what else did we do? We focused our content. We started, again, as I said, like we started to pivot. We started to do things. right? Before we had like our long-term content plan, it was like I spoke with my head of content, Anna, and said, Anna, forget everything that you've been working on. Forget what the guys have been working on. We need to come up with a new plan, and we need to come up with a new plan now, right? So things like, what can we be doing to pitch into Forbes, for example, around, for example, SaaS brands responding to COVID-19. That was one piece. Another piece was around email templates to help SDRs during COVID. What we started to do was start to focus on the pain points of our core users, which is salespeople, and start writing content about that in terms of where their current problems are in the current world situation. So you as a salesperson, what are you concerned about right now? So when the pandemic first hit, for example, it was coming towards the end of Q1. And a core thing that people were concerned about was, how am I going to create pipeline in Q2 with this thing going on? Or how am I going to close off my Q1 strong with this thing going on? Okay, so it hit just at the end of Q1 when you were thinking, okay, I've got 2 weeks now to close out the quarter. And then Donald Trump goes and says that he's closing the borders to the US. You know, what do you do? And what we started to do is really focus on the pipeline bit, because we knew, okay, the pipeline bit is going to be most important because we're coming into Q2 now. And we started driving traffic that way. And we started the conversation around, hey, don't be worried. Just put your head down and start doing it. And here's how we can help. Okay. So for example, there's email templates to help SDRs during COVID-19. We released that, I think it was like around April time. And that's been driving something like close to 15,000 visitors a month or so, just that one piece of content, you know? And I'll get to now some of the results. So like, what did this lead to? So from a traffic perspective, look at the orange line below here, shows us 2019, right? So January to July 2019. The blue line up the top looks at 2020, so January to July 2020. We basically doubled our traffic. And even starting at the start of the year, you can see down here in January, you can see that it's up and to the right throughout the entire year. Growth, 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 growth. And look where it started to really significantly grow was around May time. So you see that there, the blue line here. You can see that that's basically where we've seen a lot of that main growth. And the reason for that main growth was because of those content pieces that I'd mentioned before, pivoting. Start talking or start having the conversation that people are having, and start offering solutions and value towards that conversation. And that's how you grow content, right? So we've grown like from the start of the year up until now by like 50, 60% more, 70% since the start of the year, which is insane.
Yeah, it's quite a lot, like considering especially the situation, the growth you have achieved is like, you know. Exactly. And another point is like, this also goes towards like our gut feeling. So a lot of this is gut. Okay. A lot of this was like, okay, like nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows, right? First and foremost. But what we did was we said, okay, let's use our gut feeling. Let's like be a bit like, okay, what's the best way forward here, and just go with it and do something. Like, that's the point of this, do something. Like, don't sit on your hands, but just try out things. And the fact that we were trying so many things, like 90% of the stuff we did just stuck. We were clever about it. We said, okay, let's join in on the conversation. Let's try lead the conversation, which we did. But at the same time, like myself and Anna had a content around February, like towards the end of January, we'd been working with an SEO agency for a long time. Okay. And one of my first decisions when I first came in, the CMO here, I said, I don't think we need them. If we have a head of content, we have somebody there that knows what they're talking about, and like an SEO agency is basically telling her what to focus on, whereas they're not really part of the organization. They don't know the industry that well, and their core focus was, hey, increase the number of signups which are coming in, right? Signups to trial. Now with that, like there was a lot of top of funnel content created, because at the top of funnel content, like listicles, for example. The top 20 tools for whatever for 2020, let's say, right? And a lot of those driving a lot of top of funnel traffic, and a lot of top of funnel traffic from probably countries that weren't really a core focus for us. And driving, although they did drive a lot of signups, those signups weren't turning into customers, right?
So they were signing up for trial and they were trialing the product, but then afterwards they weren't really turning into revenue. Okay. So again, this revenue disconnect piece, but in their mind, they were like, okay, we're driving the signups. It's fine. Like our job is done here. Okay. And I started thinking, okay, well, like how can we increase traffic based on what we know about our company? Like Anna's been with the company longer than I have. She's been with Leadfeeder for over a year. She knows the product well. She knows the company well. She knows the industry well. Like she can obviously do a better job, I think, than our SEO agency that are only looking at us for a couple of hours a week and don't really have any affiliation to the brand or the industry or the product. And we decided to sack them. And that happened at the start of February, right? They did their job for the while, a year that we needed them for. And they did a good job, but we decided, hey, let's try pull it in ourselves and let's try do it ourselves, which was a big risk. Like our traffic could have gone boom, but at the same time, it went up to the right. Mm-hmm. So again, it was a gut feeling, acting on that gut feeling and being like, okay, let's just go and do it, right? So off the back of that, what did we grow our leads from? So when I'm talking about signups, okay, signups to trial. This is not top of funnel leads. These are people that have entered into the system, that have come into a trial and that are likely to turn into business, okay? So like if we're looking at year on year, so March 2019 versus March 2020, there was zero growth, right? And we were thinking in March, like, oh, how's this gonna go? Okay, how's this gonna go? But then we look at April, 30% growth, May, 43% growth, June, 38% growth, July, 35% growth, overall 28% year-on-year growth from the number of people that we were bringing into trial that were qualified, right? During a time in which we were like, this could go either way. Mm-hmm. So from a leads perspective, qualified leads perspective, growth, you know, how did it happen? By reacting, by doing things, by making sure that whatever we were doing was making sense, right? Now, a couple of the things that I'd like to focus on is like, okay, how did we, like, what were other things that we were doing? Some things that really resonated. I just mentioned that, like, double down on the things that are working. And one of the things that really worked very, very well for us were webinars. So in terms of on top of doing all the cuts in terms of budgets for paid, on top of doing all the content work, which is driving massive amount of traffic, we were also saying, okay, well, let's like try to speak with the customer base and the prospect base on a semi-regular basis and try to give some value, okay? And what we did was we started doing webinars. And we were speaking before this, you said, hey, you've been pretty busy doing webinars. And I said, yes, I have been very busy doing webinars. And I'll get to now in a couple of minutes how this entire webinar thing started. But off the back of that, like we managed to get like over 11 webinars. We managed to get over 11,000 registrations with very little money put behind them. Like we tested a couple of campaigns at the start to be like, okay, is it going to drive more? And it didn't. So we turned those campaigns off. Okay. But let me show you how we got, like, what's the timeline on this, right? So March 14th, okay? This is the day that Donald Trump announced the border closed. March 14th, that's the day, right? So I started talking with Alex Ollie, and Alex is a mate of mine. In the meantime, a mate. Prior to this, sort of more of a colleague acquaintance. We'd done some business together. So Alex is the CEO, or not the CEO, a co-founder of a company called ReachDesk. And ReachDesk are a direct mail platform, okay, based out of the UK, but they also have presence in the US and in New York, okay? And Alex was actually in New York when I texted him on March 14th. So I just started texting him saying, hey, buddy, how's it going? Like, what's going on? And you can see from the conversation here, like his last message, he said, I'm in the middle of scampering back from NYC because of Donald's recent ban, right? So I think this was on the Saturday evening I was texting him, or maybe Friday evening. And he's like, the conversation sort of said, okay, well, why don't we try to do some content together? Because in December of last year, myself and Alex came together and we did an ABM webinar, right? Just when I first started with Leadfeeder, I said, okay, well, let's try to do some lead gen. Let's, you know, get something going here. And we organized an ABM webinar. And I think for that, we drove about 350 registrations or so for that, right? And then we said, okay, like that's the Saturday or the Friday. And we said, let's talk again on Monday. So we spoke again on Monday. We said, okay, let's focus on a webinar that's, you know, focused on the core problem the sales are having right now. And it was about creating pipeline. So we were coming to the end of Q1, as I mentioned before, starting Q2. How do you keep calm and start creating pipeline for Q2, right? So we just like pushed out all of our knowledge that we had about what's the best way to create pipeline, created a deck, created the messaging, started pushing it out on the Tuesday. Okay. So remember, we spoke Monday, came up with the messaging on the Monday, pushed something out on the Tuesday. And by Tuesday, Johnny, who's the person behind all the webinars and Leadfeeder, started pushing it out, right? So he just put up the webinar registration page, okay? And he put it out to the team and said, okay, look, 23 signups already. And we were like, okay, 23 signups, fine, you know, okay. Like this was just as soon as he pushed it out. And I started sharing it with a couple of people on social and different things. We hadn't done the pure strong push yet. You can see here, he's going to put some ads together for LinkedIn, and an email goes out to all users and leads via active campaign later on that day. So we hadn't done an active push yet. So that's still Tuesday. Now remember, this was going to happen on Thursday. So we're still 2 days away from the webinar. We haven't done any active push yet. Okay. So you can see we pushed out an email, and within an hour we had 233 registrations. Okay. So I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And a couple of guys from my team were pinging me saying, hey, this is getting, it's growing a bit of wings here. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So I started to make a little bit of a deal out of it with the internal team. So you see, like, this is Yako here, our CRO. This is Chris here, one of our salespeople. Like, people are getting it behind it and being like, oh, this is actually going to work. This is great. I can push it out to my client base. I can push it out to my prospect base. This is cool. And we got a lot of internal excitement about it, and people started pushing it themselves. Okay. And me personally, I was watching this like figure here, this 233 registrations, just like increase. Like every second, I'd be pressing refresh button on our webinar tool and just seeing this number increase, right? Still 233, still rather low, but that's only 5 hours into the push, right? So if I look at, you know, the next morning, 10:20 the next morning, 430 registrations. So less than 24 hours after that 233, we're looking at 430. And the next day, when we actually got the day off, we got up to 650 registrations with over 250 people tried to get in, right? And what happened was our webinar service crashed when over 250 people tried to get in. But at the end of the day, what happened was we ended up having more registrations and more attendees than we had for any webinar that we'd ever done in the past. So I said, okay, well, like, there's something to this. Why don't we double down and try it again, right? So right after that, the next day, like you can see at 12 or almost 1 o'clock the afternoon the next day, I started pushing people on the team, being like, okay, we need to do something next week, right? So what can we do? Let's start looking at a topic around what we're doing at Leadfeeder in terms of how we're making a difference. And for that one, we had about 500 registrations and about, again, 300 people show up, right? So again, I was like, okay, this is going pretty well. So I started then pushing it like all the time. So if you look at the next one that we did, it was with this guy here, Aaron Ross. So Aaron Ross is the author of a book called Predictable Revenue. He started the SDR function or the BDR function or the inside sales function, whatever you want to call it, at Salesforce. So this guy is, you know, he's written this book, which is also known as like the sales Bible of Silicon Valley, Predictable Revenue. If you haven't read it, you should. But he's basically like the godfather of outbound, basically. And he grew the Salesforce business from 1 million to 100 million in the space of I don't know how many years, but not a long amount of time. So off the back of that, he's seen much success. So I know Aaron from doing some work together. And I reached out to Aaron and said, hey, mate, fancy coming on and doing a webinar? Because he'd reached out to me a couple of weeks prior saying, hey, I like the content you guys are doing. How about we do something together? I said, oh, perfect timing. So for that webinar, we got 1,916 registrations, right? And 1,000 people came on. 1,000 people came on for that webinar. So I was like, okay, we need to keep going. So it just kept on building momentum. We started gathering a fan base. So like you can see there's two faces down here. You've got Dan Disney and KD Dorsey. These two guys are very well known in the sales world. So Dan, for example, set up a company called The Daily Sales. They've got about 700,000 people in that specific group on LinkedIn, and all salespeople. He's really well known for social selling. KD is like an influencer when it comes to sales. And we got the two of those guys on to do a masterclass on outbound, right? Now that worked incredibly well again, sort of 1,500 registrations. Like afterwards, the after effect of that was like fandom, you know, people were like putting stuff out on LinkedIn saying, I just attended the best webinar I've ever been on. It was crazy. It worked so well. And, you know, off the back of that, we just kept on, like, as Leadfeeder, I was like taking screenshots of all this stuff, like putting it into a slide, taking a screenshot of that slide, and then pushing that out to the world and getting lots of interaction on LinkedIn and everything. So like constant brand growth, just from like, hey, we're riding a wave on this thing. Let's keep on the surfboard and let's keep going. Let's not lose any focus. Let's keep on doing it week after week after week after week. And of course, it starts to slow down a little bit. Summertime slowed it down. We did another one yesterday, which was good again, nearly close to 500 registrations, with a guy called Alex Goldfine. And Alex just released a book around 5-minute selling is what it's called. He's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. So he's like, he knows what he's talking about. So with all these different things, like we're starting to attract like people that are like, hey, I want to appear on a Leadfeeder webinar. You know, like Alex got on the Leadfeeder webinar because Dan here, the guy in the red t-shirt here, he said, hey, you need to go on a Leadfeeder webinar. It's awesome, right? And like it's launched so much more content off the back of it. And it's also helped us like grow the brand from a revenue perspective, right? So look at like, we've only been doing this for a couple of months, but as I said, 11 webinars, 11,000 registrations, 6.5 thousand net new leads, $1,000 or 1,000 euros spent, which is like nothing. And that was just a test at the start. And then with that, we've managed to touch like 30K of annual recurring revenue, right? So like we deal in monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue, meaning that 30K is money that you're going to keep on getting every year, basically, if you're not from the recurring revenue world. But for us, that's a big chunk of growth, right? But at the same time, though, having that, not just looking from this perspective at the revenue piece, but also looking at the reach piece that we've gotten with the brand. Just looking at these numbers here, 11K registration, 6.5K net new leads, has opened up a new potential prospect base to us that we didn't previously have. And at the same time, as I said, we've brought down our budgets to 1/3 of what they were, but at the same time, still managed to grow the company month on month. June was our best month ever, right? So like our best growth month that we've ever had from a revenue perspective was June this year. After March, April, and May, months where people are like, oh, how's this going to go? March, disaster. April, a little bit better, 0 growth. June or May, a bit of growth. June, massive growth. July, growth. August, growth. Coming into autumn now, we're like, okay, like no problem. Like I don't need any budget. No, it's fine. Cut my budgets. We'll keep going. And the rest of the team, the marketing team, are like, okay, like if we get more budget cuts for whatever reason, then we're fine. We're going to manage. You know, we're building something here, and we've managed to build a brand greatly just from doing this, right? If I continue, so how did we manage to get this going, right? Because people said, like, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me being like, okay, it's great, like you said, that you get on these great people and everything, like, but you obviously know them, and you know you've managed to get into your network. I said, yeah, at the start I did. So like Alex here, you know, I knew Alex, I've worked with him before. So at the start I was like, hey, let's do a webinar. But then I started running out of a Rolodex. Like I didn't have like more people to reach out to be like, okay, like let's do a webinar together, man. You know, you owe me a favor and I can do you a favor in return type of thing. I was reaching out to people that I didn't know, right? So I was like, again, to go back to the beg, borrow, steal analogy, which I said before, who do you know that can introduce you to somebody? You know, you mentioned when you introduced me, like I'm a marketer in a salesperson's body or vice versa, right? I go back to my sales days and go, okay, how do I get an into my prospect? My prospect here is people that I want to get on webinars. So what I was doing is I created my prospect list. So I had my list of 100 names where I said, they're going to drive an audience. And I said, okay, what can I do to break into their inbox so that they want to come on and talk to me, right? And I was doing cold outreach. I was being an SDR. I was doing my cold calling. I was sending videos of Dale Dupree, social influencer. Every post he puts out on LinkedIn, you get close to 1,000 likes, load of comments. He's got, I don't know how many 100,000 followers, etc. I was sending videos to him of me walking my dog through the vineyards here in Vienna, being like, hey man, why don't you jump on a call and I'll show you the vineyards here in Austria. Beautiful day, you know? I'm trying to connect him. He wrote back saying, shit man, I've never seen anybody send me like a video of a vineyard in Austria. This is awesome, you know? And then we started the conversation, and then I had him on for a webinar a month ago, you know? And that's how we got started with Morgan. The same thing, Morgan Ingram. I just started reaching out, and I just said, hey, you know, I know you through XYZ. What do you think? Like, these are the numbers that we've been seeing from the webinars and so on. I sent him some videos, also personalized approach. And he wrote back a couple of weeks later saying, hey man, yeah, sorry I missed this. Let's do something. And with Morgan, I've managed to do a couple of pieces of content now. He's got 300,000 followers, and he's maxed out the number of contacts that he can get on LinkedIn, which I think is 120,000 or something. So like the reach that he's got, and all these guys share the stuff that we're putting out after it. So like the LinkedIn stuff, like from Leadfeeder, they're sharing it after it because they're like, oh, the reaction and interaction on these webinars were great. I want to share this with my base because it's actually put my brand forward a little bit as well. So we've managed to grow on their side as well. But again, it's been a lot of work. Like with Alex here, for Dan Disney, as I mentioned before, like I didn't know Dan, but I knew that Alex did. I said, hey, Alex, can you maybe give me an intro into Dan? He said, yeah, sure. So Alex, somebody who's a friend of Dan, gave me the intro, and then I started the conversation that way. KD, the same thing. Hey, Kevin, thanks for accepting the connect. You know, over the past 2 months, we've been doing this. We've gotten, you know, we've done 7,000 registrations, all organic. It'd be great to have you on to grow your personal brand, you know? And after a couple of days, he's seen that. He said, oh, actually, this doesn't look too bad. You know, so it's really been grinding it, hustling it. Like, it's been a sale. Like, I've been selling to people, you know, it hasn't been easy, but we've managed to grow a bit of reputation now through our results, whilst at the same time, some like thinking outside of the box in terms of how to target these guys. And that's how we've managed to do so well with them, right? So off the back of the webinar series as well, like one of the things from my side was like, okay, we're doing these webinars, we're chugging them out quite often. How do we get more out of these guys? How do we get more content from them? How do we get more out of growing the brand, and et cetera, et cetera? So I was like, okay, well, like the core thing about these webinars were that we were offering like valuable pieces of advice to people. Okay, so like key things that you can go and take away from these webinars and then go and implement without actually having to put your hand in your pocket. There's no like sales pitch in them. Like, I'm not coming on and being like, oh, Leadfeeder is going to solve all your problems and here's a product demo. You know, we didn't do any of that. I've got an opinion on this in that there's the best pitch is no pitch at all. Okay, so like we were getting our brand in front of people, we were getting people to know Leadfeeder, we were getting people to know the people that we're bringing on by associating Leadfeeder with these people that made us more trustworthy as a brand. And within the webinars, I was saying, hey, Leadfeeder can offer XYZ as a solution, and that was it. There was no like slides on it or whatever. It was the brand, Leadfeeder brand there. Then whenever a typical cadence for it was that the speaker would then talk about, for example, outbound. And then I'd pitch in a little bit being like, and you know, Leadfeeder could help out with here, XYZ and outbound. You know, you can prioritize which companies to reach out to because we show the intent of the companies which are coming to your site based on the behavior that they're showing on your website. And that would be it. Like little snippets, but helpful stuff, right? And there'd be no big push, okay? Now, off the back of it, as I said, like the main part was this value bit. And I thought, okay, well, like, let's really double down on this value piece, okay? And I sat down with Johnny, who I mentioned earlier on, who's on my team, who's my head of demand gen. And I said to him, like, okay, well, what can we be doing to maybe capitalize on this a little bit further? He was like, what about a video series, you know? And we were like, okay, well, let's think about something. So what we did was we came up with something called a B2B rebellion, right? And what we started to do was get the people that we've had on for the webinars on and just say, hey, like what I do is off the back of the webinar say, hey, we're also doing this B2B rebellion series as well, which we're going to be pushing out on social. We're going to be pushing it out on LinkedIn. We're going to be pushing it out via numerous channels out to our database of 50,000, sorry. And people were like, oh, okay, why not? And it's literally just a conversation between me and them. And it lasts about 15, 20 minutes. And I say, hey, look, just come up with 3 to 5 points, which sales and marketers will find like good and interesting and like be key takeaways for them in the current environment. Like what can they be doing a little bit differently, or what can they go and implement that they don't need to put their hand in their pocket for? And then what we'll do is we'll just push it out via our numerous channels. And everybody was like, okay, that sounds great, actually. Let's do it. And I'd already created a relationship, and it's an additional piece of content that we have. You know, like I feel like we're so overloaded with content now. We're in a place where we're like first world problem type of thing, where you know, we've got so much that we don't know what to do with it all almost. So, but the content has been really, really strong, and we've managed to get the top names on again to do another brand mention with them and Leadfeeder. Look, Dan down here again on personal branding, you know. Nikki Ivey down here talking about video outreach for SDRs. James Ski from Sales Confidence coming on and talking about the secrets for SDRs. Michael Hansen coming on and talking about outbound sales. And we have about 25, 30 of these things in the pipeline. Like, we've got so many coming through that we can't actually, the video editor can't get through them quick enough. So I've got another one coming out this week with Morgan Ingram. I've got another one with Aaron Ross coming out next week. Katie Dorsey. Like, there's all of these different names that are coming through, and it's like people are looking at it being like, wow, like, how did you manage to do that? Just go build a relationship with these guys, you know. And we've just doubled down, capitalized on what's working, and tried to pivot it slightly so that we're able to get more value out of it. And that's where the B2B Rebellion came from. So if you are interested in having a look at the B2B Rebellion, go to leadfeeder.com/B2B Rebellion. You can see the full list of videos there. You can also sign up. We send out new videos every week, and we let people know by email. And that's it. Yeah, and that's how we managed to grow our brand during COVID.
It was really an interesting story and extremely informative as well. So it's like really nice to see like how you, especially how you took some actions initially in terms of cutting the unnecessary costs and where you can focus on and finding a new idea and kind of, you know, more. I mean, I've seen a lot of people taking up ideas, but they don't really do that consistently enough. So that consistency and the way it has grown, it's like really awesome to see. So thank you so much for your time. And what about like, just as you said, Leadfeeder, I think you've come up with some new features as well, right? In terms of, have you used this time to kind of develop the product as well in terms of?
So yes, we have, of course. So like with Leadfeeder, of course, like one of the core questions is always, how are you recognizing more? So like, just to explain what Leadfeeder do, we recognize companies that are coming to your website. So typically you will convert on your site. So somebody will come to your site and fill out a form, therefore they're de-anonymized, you know who that person is, right? Or you know who the company is because of the email address that they've given you. You probably, top performing brands or top performing companies are somewhere between 2 to 4%, right? Like 5% is like crazy good, you know, across the site, especially on organic stuff. But what we do is we try to fill in that gap between that sort of 95 to 98% there in terms of the companies that are coming to your site, what those companies have been looking at, how many people from those companies have been visiting, where they came from, how long they spent on the site, etc., etc. So what we do is we identify and then we qualify. So the qualification bit is, you know, done based on the activity and the behavior. So showing the buyer intent of that specific company. So things like if they're looking at your pricing page or they're looking at specific product features, they'll probably be a bit further down the funnel or a little bit showing a little bit higher intent than somebody that would be just like browsing a couple of blog posts, right? So you've got that piece, and then you've got the connect piece. So what we've got within the product itself is a list of the contacts that are at that specific company. So the job or people that are in specific roles, and you can search within the product for that. So you can connect with them directly via the product, whether it's within Leadfeeder, whether it's via email or via LinkedIn. And on top of that as well, it's connected directly to all major CRM platforms. So it's got two-way CRM sync. So into Leadfeeder to say, hey, this account looks like it exists in Salesforce or Pipedrive, whatever it might be, Zoho, Microsoft Dynamics. And at the same time, it will also then push that information into Salesforce. So as a salesperson, you can be looking at your Salesforce feed to see, okay, these companies have been visiting my site, therefore I should probably prioritize them for my outreach today, okay? So during the COVID times, of course, with everybody working from home, it's made things, you know, that's the first question that people ask. Hey, how are you still recognizing companies with people working from home? We've managed to, over the years, build out functionality or based off of databases that we've been building from ourselves as well as some partners to be able to increase that recognition rate using certain unique identifiers with people or companies, not individuals. We don't recognize individuals, we recognize the companies, but based on the individual's behavior, we can recognize the companies, and even if people are working from home. And we've managed to roll out a lot of those updates during this COVID time, and we're starting to see match rates go up. So best way to come and check out if Leadfeeder is working for you and your company in your industry is to just sign up for a trial. So it's simple to sign up for a free trial. go to leadfeeder.com. On leadfeeder.com, there's buttons everywhere asking you to sign up for trial. With that, all you need to do is just implement a piece of tracking script into the header of your site, or you can do it directly by Google Tag Manager. And once you're up and running with the tracking code, we start recognizing the companies that are visiting your site immediately. It takes probably 5 minutes to set up that tracking code. All you need is access to either Google Tag Manager or the header of your site. That's basically it.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you so much, Andy, for taking this time to talk to our audience, especially with your busy schedule. And
that's all right.
Informative and very interesting. Yeah. So thank you so much, Andy.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.